Welcome into the Landon Tangwall Show. Indiana at Oregon, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. Autzen Stadium, a top 10 Big Ten clash. We don't get a lot of these like the SEC does. Let's savor this one, ladies and gentlemen. I was really enjoying studying this one all week, putting together this show. A lot of talent in this one and some really interesting matchups that we are about to get into. So, Indiana's offense versus Oregon's defense. Let's get it cracking. Indiana's offense is interesting from an outside perspective because just looking at the stats and you look and say this is a high-powered elite passing offense. And that's not all the way wrong to say, but not in the traditional sense that most people would assume. Fernando Mendoza has some serious arm talent. He can put the ball wherever he wants to, and he's incredibly confident in his ability of just ball placement across the field. Like, and ask him to make any pass, looks like he can do it. But this is a very simple offense for Indiana. It's a ton of the quick passing game. I'm talking easy access where you love quick outs, hitches, all the underneath stuff. They've had a lot of defenses that have kind of just given that to them. So if Mendoza likes what he sees, especially in the RPO game, you'll see a ton of run pass option where if Mendoza's looking out and he sees off coverage by the cornerback and he has a hitch out there by that wide receiver and he's like, I'm going to get this out there. Like if he's got off coverage, he's firing that RPO pass like 8 out of 10 times. He loves doing that. So I think the game plan remains somewhat similar for Indiana as it has been up to this point because I don't think you want to get this Indiana offensive line into a situation where they have to be in long-term pass protection. And I'm mainly looking at the right side of this offensive line, Benson at right tackle, Lynch at right guard, the much weaker side in pass pro and in run game. They've given up 3 times the amount of pressures that the left side has given up for Indiana. So Mateo Uiagalelei versus Benson at right tackle. That is the matchup to watch. Mateo is really a talented pass rusher for the size he's at. 6'5", 275 pounds, and he's got a deep bag. I mean, cross chop, jump swipe, spin move. I've seen a lot out of studying his tape. Now, Benson can be really good when he lands his punch. If he gets his punch off, you're getting stunted right in the chest, but he's also stiff and will lean when he punches. So I think Mateo's going to get some wins there, but it's more about how long are you asking Benson and company to kind of hold up in pass protection? Because if you're Indiana, you got to stay out of 3rd and long. That it's a non-negotiable. Oregon's defense loves simulated pressures. So simulated pressures basically means I'm going to put up 3 guys on the left side of this offensive line, make them adjust the protection. Hey, let's slide to the left. And then all of a sudden, when the snap happens, they drop everybody and bring the blitz from the other side, and the offensive line isn't ready. You don't want to get into those situations if you were Indiana, because then you're in just, oh crap. And that's watching Oregon's defense. They've gotten pretty much every single offense that they've played, they've gotten with the simulated pressures. It's not easy to pick up. And you know, I think part of the reason why I have some worries is because Indiana so far this year is very accustomed to just getting the ball out quickly. Mendoza is actually tied right now for first in the Big Ten in average time to throw. 2.6 seconds is how quickly on average he gets the ball out. That's very quick. You're asking your offensive line to hold up for just 2.5 seconds. That's a fairly easy ask. So that's why I got my worries about getting into 3rd down, because you haven't really lived in that world if you're Indiana. And like I said, seeing what I'm seeing, I'm not super confident in the right side of the offensive line. And we saw some problems against Iowa when you did get in a little bit more of a 3rd and long situation where Iowa brought some pressures, and there were some moments of some lapses for sure. And like I said, really just the right side. The left side gave up 1 pressure. The right side gave up 6 pressures against Iowa. So that's kind of my matchup to watch closely in this game. I will be posting more. I mean, I'm giving you guys a full rundown in this, but I'm going to be posting more cut-ups, stats, everything you need to know on my Twitter at Landon Tangwall. So give me a follow on there. We're also going to live tweet the game. Excited for that. All right, let's talk about the run game matchups here. Indiana runs a ton of inside zone, and it's almost always paired with an RPO. It's not generally just straight up inside zone. Mendoza is reading someone of, hey, do I want to fire this thing? If this linebacker steps up just a little bit, I'm firing that quick slant right in there. That's a big piece of what Indiana does on offense. And I think one place that Indiana can take advantage of this Oregon defense is the linebackers. So Betcher has been okay, and obviously I know he's a hometown staple. I'm a fan of his, but hasn't, I think he, been kind of on and off there. But Jackson, their other linebacker, has really struggled this year. Not very physical in the run game and kind of has just gotten swallowed up by some blockers. Also, 25% missed tackle rate. So every fourth tackle that he attempts is getting broken. That's not a good rate at all. I think, honestly, Oregon is better putting Jerry Mixon in there. I would much rather see Mixon in there than our boy Jackson. But if you're Indiana, take advantage of that. If I can get Hemby one-on-one with either of those linebackers in space, I like that. So now the question is, how do you get that? You got to get through the Oregon defensive line. And I think that is the biggest problem for this Indiana run game, is this is a stout front. Oregon's edges, Mateo Uiagalelei and Tatum Tuioti, are really good at just boxing everything in. Now, as I said, Indiana really likes to just run inside zone. And a lot of times you run inside zone, but you'll see Hemby, like, they'll bounce it outside. The play is designed to go up the middle and everybody kind of crashes in and he can bounce it. Now, like I said, because of the way that Oregon plays, and a lot of times it's kind of, you got the overhang and it's really meant to kind of box everything back in, you're going to have to win in the middle. That's how I see it right now, because those edges are so stout. So defensive tackles, Bear Alexander and Amari Washington versus the interior of this Indiana offensive line. Tion Gray as well at nose tackle. I'm a Pat Coogan fan, Indiana center. I loved him at Notre Dame. Obviously, I think has some limitations athletically, but one hell of a player, and he, a damn warrior. He brings it every single time. Evans at left guard, I think, is a very good player as well. As I said, he's very good in pass pro. That's kind of, like I said, it's easier to be good in pass pro when you're getting the ball out quickly. In run game, I think he has his moments where he's got, but overall, I've been impressed with what I've seen. A very solid run blocker, understands how to handle movement, and is pretty physical there. But the biggest liability and the problem for Indiana really is Lynch at right guard. A true liability, and I fear that Alexander and Washington will have their way with him. Which way they want it, it's not going to be a good day for Lynch. There's a lot of his tape where he just falls down so much. I was talking about this with QB11 for Oregon. He covers them over there, does a great job. Anytime you see an offensive lineman that ends up on the ground on like 15% of the plays, 20%, it just tells you they're kind of stiff and they don't move very well. And that's what you see out of Lynch a lot. So I think that's the place to attack, and that's kind of the point of attack to watch for both sides. Of how are you handling that if you're Indiana? Are you scheming around that? And can Oregon take advantage of the weak link on this offensive line? And I mentioned Bear Alexander. That's someone I'm really interested to watch in this one, because going into the Penn State game, I studied Bear, and it was kind of like meh for me, especially Northwestern. It was low effort. It was really kind of lacked those impact plays from Bear, and then just flipped the switch. Nope, Penn State turned it on. He had the best game of his career, honestly. 1 sack, 2 pressures, 5 stops. So stops is a PFF metric. Very similar to TFLs. TFLs have to be for a loss, obviously tackle for a loss. Stops are TFLs or like a 0-yard gain or just a 1-yard gain or something that results kind of a loss for the offense. So a very good play, and he makes the tackle. That's what a stop is. He had 5 of those against Penn State. So which Alexander shows up against Indiana. And like I said, I don't want to make it seem like it's like a flip of the coin of who you're going to get. I think he was progressing and was definitely getting better as it went on. And Northwestern was just kind of a blimp in the road. It was in the morning. It was rainy. Oregon had to travel out there. There wasn't a lot to get up for that one. But if Bear can continue what he put on tape against Penn State, against Indiana, that allows Oregon to do a lot more, and you have really talented interior if you were Oregon. So that's another matchup to really keep an eye on, Bear Alexander versus that interior. You know what you're getting in Amari Washington. Just the flashes that he puts on tape, you see it and you say that could be the best defensive tackle in college football. Like I said, there's some moments where you say, okay, I would like him to do a little bit better here, but the highest highs for Washington is the best of the best. All right, let's talk Oregon's DBs versus Indiana wide receivers. Now, Oregon's DBs were supposed to come into this game already having a test. Supposed to play one of the best quarterbacks in college football, supposedly in the preseason. Penn State's passing game is poverty. UCLA clamped it down. So then you start to ask the question, did Oregon really get tested? Did their DBs, their young DBs get tested? I think so to a degree. And I've been very impressed with Finney and Obegadu. Let me try this one time. Obegadu. Let me know. Correct me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm learning. Strappy as Strappy gets, though. Let me tell you what. They are seatbelt, as the cornerbacks like to do. But now you do see a test. I do like Cooper's game, and then obviously Surratt is a very talented wide receiver. So what I start to look at is what is Oregon going to come out with coverage-wise? Because we saw it recently. Oregon loves to come out in that 3 safety look where Thieneman is playing that whole defender. He's not a linebacker, but he's not as deep as a safety. And so he's able to add on and run support, and he's able to, that was where he got the interception at the end of the Penn State game against Drew Aller. So I think you're going to see a lot of that 3 safeties looks, but I'm curious, how much is Oregon going to give Indiana in a sense of, I've talked about it, Indiana likes the easy access stuff. They love the quick stuff. Is Oregon going to be pressed up on them? Are they going to give them a little bit to start? What does that look like? Because that's what Indiana's offense is built on. That's how they eat. That's how they get fed every day. So if Oregon forces them out of that ability to just hit the quick game the entire time, Mendoza's one hell of a player. I'm curious to see how he adjusts. He hasn't really had to truly adjust yet to something being taken away fully. It's a little bit of a chess match to keep an eye on there. Dan Lanning, is obviously doing a great job with that defense and Tosh Lupoy, but it is, Lanning has full control of that thing, and he has done some really, really good things. So that's a little bit of a chess match there to keep an eye on. Mendoza, how does he answer the bell if there are things taken away? All right, let's talk Oregon offense, Indiana defense. Indiana's strength of their defensive line is their defensive tackles, number 95, Tucker, and 0, Wheeler. So they both move very well, but they get most of their success from, and just being most disruptive, when they are shooting a gap, when they are slanting, when there's some type of stunt or blitz. That is when they are at their best because they are a little bit smaller and they, like I said, they move well. They're very fluid rushers. So they want to get skinny, get in that hole, swipe over someone, and then get back into their gap. So very movement heavy defense, like slants, stunts, blitzes, all that type of stuff. Both of them just barely 300 pounds. So I think that's something to look at as well of if you're Poncho, if you're Pregnon, are you able to move these guys out of there? Are you able to pick up the stunts and the movement that you are getting from this Indiana defensive front? So you're going to have to make sure communication is on point. And Oregon's offensive line has been beyond that. Their communication, their trust in each other, that they know if this defensive tackle slants from my right side to my left side, from this A-gap to this A-gap, I'm trusting that my left guard's going to be there. And it has been that way for Oregon up to this point. Now, I think the best matchup for Tucker and Wheeler is Oregon's right guard, Yulee. Has had some issues getting dented in the run game. I saw that at Northwestern, same thing against Penn State. He was really the only one where I was like, in the run game, that doesn't look so hot. Now, obviously, he's a good player and had his moments, but that was the number one thing I said, okay, if I'm Indiana, I'm watching the tape, that's where I would attack. Let's take advantage of him. Sometimes he gets in a bad base, gets his hands really outside, so you're able to get into his chest and kind of dent him back. So are you able to take advantage of that if you are Indiana? Now, Indiana also, not a starter, but a very heavy dose of Mario Landino, number 97, who generally plays a lot of interior, like a lot of 4-eye for them, so like right inside the tackle and the guard. Not crazy athletic, but has a really good strike and shed, and then has just produced a lot in the pass rush game. He's a savvy rusher in those stunts and those blitzes, and always seems to understand how to manipulate the offensive lineman best to get home to the quarterback. So 97 is going to be on the field a lot. Now, I think this offensive tackle edge battle is fairly interesting. Indiana's edges, Kamara and Wyatt versus Oregon's offensive tackles, World and Harkey. So Harkey and World have both had their own struggles in pass pro that are very different. Harkey sometimes will get beat around the edge because he drops that back foot and gives a soft edge to the quarterback. And then World, very good with movement, but really struggles with his anchor and being able to take on those powerful rushes. Now, I think this matchup is I'd lean towards favorable for the Oregon offensive line. Kamara has some nice moves, but World is fantastic as far as his movement. Like I said, he's able to get into his spot, get where he needs to be. It's just the anchor that has been the problem, but the movement itself has been great for World. So I think the question starts to become if World, either one of these edges, is starting to see this tape and say, hey, let's get into some power rush moves. Let's get into some long arms. Can World get there? And then can he make sure he's anchoring down and not getting pushed back into the quarterback? So that's been the issue for him. And the last piece of kind of this just pass rush game is the blitz game. So Indiana will bring blitzes on third down. Oregon's offensive line should be ready because they show on tape like very little does Indiana actually just bring a normal pass rush where they just got like 4 guys and they just go forward. It's always some type of stunt. It's generally some type of blitz. You will see linebackers pressed up where they might bring 2 linebackers and drop both defensive ends, or bring 1 linebacker and drop this defensive end. So there's a lot of communication, once again, that this Oregon offensive line is going to have to get into. So you got to be ready for that. There is just a lot of communication over, knocking guys off, getting to the blitzer and that looper that's coming over top on the stunt. So be ready for that. Now, watching this tape, number 46, Isaiah Jones jumped off the screen, linebacker for Indiana. Has the feel of kind of like that gritty walk-on linebacker that like kind of like Betcher, where it's like you can see like some athletic shortcomings for sure, but damn, like just a ball player. Just goes out there and loves to play and plays hard as it gets. I mean, there was multiple plays where it was like back-to-back TFLs for him. He's fun to watch play football. Now the linebackers. Hardy at will linebacker, and then you got Fisher at Mike linebacker. They're really good in the run game. And like I said, that entire front 7 for Indiana, I think is kind of the biggest matchup that there is, can Oregon run the ball? Are these guys going to plug efficiently? Because both linebackers, Fisher and Hardy, they plug those gaps really well. They don't miss a lot of tackles, and they understand how to take away leverage in the run game, how to box things back in, force them back into your defensive tackles, your defensive ends. So I think that is the biggest challenge for Oregon. Are you able to get this run game going? Because you also don't really want to get one-dimensional as much as you like, and we're going to get to Dante Moore and company in a second here. I don't know. You don't want to necessarily live in that world. Oregon has been best when they're able to thrive on the run game as well. So looking at it from the other angle, my biggest question for Indiana, as much as I'm very impressed with their front 7, but you're going to be doing a lot of slanting and stunting, right? And that can get home, and that can cause a lot of TFLs and distress in the backfield. But what that also does is it creates a vulnerability to get increased in the run game. So basically, what that means is if you're taking this defensive tackle from the A gap and slanting him over to the B gap, and you're plugging a linebacker, well, if they pick up that slanting guy and they pick up that linebacker, there's not that extra level of defense, and you're kind of just through. And if it gets picked up, it can create a really big hole. And obviously, Oregon running back Dair Hill is looking explosive. Like one of the better running backs in college football, has really came on the scene. And so you start to run that risk. If you're moving your defensive linemen around and they get caught and they get washed out and there's a huge hole in the B gap, Hill can take off and he can make you pay. He's had a couple really long touchdown runs on the year. So I think you might see that, but it's just a question of how much is Indiana willing to part with that. They know that there's going to be some plays where their front 7, their defensive line gets creased, but can you, the give and take, the risk reward, can you get enough of those TFLs or those no gain tackles off of your slants to where it's okay if you let up 2 to 3 decently sized runs? Now, the biggest part of this is, when you are blitzing these linebackers and moving them around, you got to have good safety help. And Indiana does have that. Lewis Moore at safety, number 7. I just all over the tape, I would see him constantly flying down where a running back would get through the line of scrimmage, and 7 would come down and just make tackle after tackle after tackle, and did not really see him miss many. He's sitting around a 12% missed tackle rate for safety. That's pretty damn good, especially the positions he's been put in where he needs to fly down full speed and track someone down. I've been really impressed with his tape. Does not miss a lot of tackles. Looks like a very smart ball player. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Can he continue that trend of being that constant for the Indiana defense that he is going to fly down and make those tackles. That brings me to Dante Moore and the Oregon wide receivers and tight ends versus the Indiana DBs. So Indiana runs a ton of cover 3. You'll see some cover 2, and you'll see some quarters. Quarters is like cover 4, but you're basically manning up to guys. So, but it's generally a lot of zone coverage. It's sit back, it's zone drops, it's fill in the run game because that's what they're very good at. So they don't run a lot of man coverage. But you know, my matchup I'm looking at, Kenyon Sadiq, who had a fairly quiet day against Penn State a couple weeks ago. I think he could have a big one on this one. Indiana needs some type of plan for who can carry Sadiq vertical. When he gets on those seam routes, especially against cover 3, where that's where the seam is vulnerable, can your linebackers get there in time? Can your safeties come down and come over and make that? Because Sadiq is big and he is very fast. And then I think the other piece, too, that you look at, what is Oregon going to be able to have, basically? What is Indiana going to give up, I guess, essentially, is what I'm saying. Like, Oregon's going to come out, and they're going to look for that. We talked about earlier for Indiana offense, but Oregon's going to come out on their side and look for that easy access stuff, because that's what Indiana's shown a lot of. And that's the one thing, when you're spot dropping and you're getting into cover 3 consistently, a lot of times there's the quick underneath stuff. There is the quick outs and the quick hitches and the RPO stuff where it's boom, let's get it out. Let's Dante Moore fire those in there and just kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts, if you will. So I expect Moore to kind of take whatever the Indiana defense gives him, especially early on. I think that's how you come out. Now, if you're the Indiana defense, be alert. Oregon will get into the screen game. And the hard part about their offense, because they're so versatile, they'll go screen game to their tight ends, to their running backs, to their wide receivers. They'll go end arounds. They'll do jet motions where they're just going to hand it off to DeCarry and Moore. And there's a lot of eye candy on this offense. Will Stein does a great job of dressing it up to test the defense's rules. Hey, if I'm bringing this guy in motion, can you guys communicate enough? Is it going to mess up your rules if we're bringing this guy here and then motion him back? And the goal is just slow you down half a second, and we're going to be able to take advantage of that, especially with the speed that Oregon has. DeCorian Moore, true freshman wide receiver, absolute burner out of Texas. And look, he's not a one-trick pony either. That's a lot of times when especially if you get a freshman wide receiver that's a speedster, it's like, oh, okay, like he'll go deep post, just take you vertical. Now, DeCorian Moore kind of has all of it in his game. He's had a lot of contested catches this year, back shoulder fades. He is just really has great hands. Everything I've seen screams superstar out of DeCorian Moore, exactly what Dante Moore needed. And so he's got an interesting matchup with Indiana cornerback Pounds. When he does match up with them, people are very high on Pounds. I don't know if I would put an elite label on him, and obviously a smaller guy at 5'9". So I think that's a little bit of a worry there. So if you get Benson on him, what is that? Is that something you are looking to attack in any way? Like I said, Indiana's defense is soft zone. So I don't know if you are Oregon, if you're really looking to try to go out and take deep shots, if it's not there. Like, I wouldn't force that. If Pounds and company are kind of just giving you everything underneath, take it. Take that all day. So far and away, I think this is the best offensive line too that this Indiana defense has faced. So how much pressure can you get on Moore? Can you make him feel uncomfortable? Because you don't want to get in a world where you give Moore 5 seconds to sit back there, because you start to give speed time, no good. You do not want DeCorian Moore, Malik Benson, Kenyon Sadiq, Hill running around there and allowing. And the other thing too is like Moore getting outside of the pocket. That's actually where he's most dangerous. Not necessarily a true runner, because he's not. He doesn't like it's not like Dylan Gabriel last year, but if he gets out in the pocket and just starts creating time, he will take it to you. He had some really impressive passes against Penn State where he was even near the sideline, like getting hit, flick it back over the middle of the field, finding his guys, finding a way. So if you are Indiana, you got to find a way to get after this guy. We talked about those matchups as far as the edges and the offensive tackles, but you can't let Moore have 4 to 5 seconds in there. All right, Oregon, -7.5 right now. I think Oregon covers by about 10. That is my prediction. way more content for you guys coming here at the Landon Tengwall Show, specifically on Twitter. Make sure you guys follow me there at Landon Tengwall. We'll have a lot of good stuff coming at you guys. Please like, comment, subscribe. Peace.